beautiful tomorrow, and tomorrow's just a dream away.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another encounter with some groovy moments from the past. We're visiting the 60s with host Dick Scapatoni, whose pop group Harper's Bazaar had a hit record back then called Feelin' Groovy. He'll be talking with our guests about a decade that shaped a whole generation, not only with the most magnificent music ever made, but also the politics, protests, and pretty much everything that happened in the swingin' 60s. So Dick, who's on today's show?
Thanks, John. Is it Cara Mia Mine or Cara Mia Mine? I don't know, but I will ask my next guest to clarify that for us. Sandy Dean has been with Jay and the Americans since their inception back in the early 60s, and the hits never stopped coming. Only in America, Come a Little Bit Closer, Cara Mia, and This Magic Moment. Would you believe they were one of the bands that was on the bill with the Beatles when they played their first concert in the U.S. at the Washington Coliseum in 1964. I've got a ton of questions for Sandy, and I do believe we shall hear a raft load of 60s rock stories coming up here in just a minute.
Cara mia, why must we say goodbye each time we part? My heart wants to die. Darling, hear my prayer. Cara mia, I'll be your love till the Cara mia, why must we say goodbye?
How many Jays were actually in Jay and the Americans? Well, obviously at least one, but my next guest knows the answer to that, as well as, is it Cara Mia Mine or Cara Mia Mine? Sandy Dean goes all the way back to the Brill Building days with Leiber and Stoller, and has worked with nearly every major 60s rock group, including the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. I know we're going to hear some fun stories today, so let's get cooking on this. Sandy, welcome to the show. And is it Cara or Cara?
It's according to where you're from.
Yeah.
But the way the correct pronunciation being it's Italian, it would be Cara.
Cara, that's what I thought.
Cara. And you don't even say the R, which for a New Yorker is really easy.
Well, it's like C-A-D-A, Cara?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cara Mia.
Okay, there we go. Got it. All right, well, good to have you on board. Let's take it literally from the top, or maybe I should say from the bottom. Go all the way back to your high school days, or even farther back than that if you want.
We can go back to Moses. This group has been around forever.
Yeah, I think so. Well, if you can go back that far, do it. And let's, bring us up to speed, starting back from the days when you were just a young man.
Well, it started out actually when we were kids. We grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and they only did two things as kids besides going to school. When you got out of school, you went and you played ball, some kind of ball, stick ball, baseball, basketball, and then you'd go into the house and play music, or listen to the radio, and then later on watch television. And my sister, who was 8.5 years older than me, she was a singer, a professional singer. So being older than me, and we grew up, we were very close, and living in an apartment, her music was all I ever heard. And her music was Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, Mel Torme, the Pied Pipers, the Four Freshmen. I mean, that's what she listened to. Bessie Smith. A very wide selection of very standard, great music. She loved the blues, torch. They called it torch singing, you know.
Yeah.
She did a lot of that. And she was a Bobby Soxer. She went to the Paramount Theater, screamed for Frank Sinatra. with all the other girls.
She saw Frank?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Jeez.
Oh, yeah. That's why she was such a fan of the big bands, because Sinatra sang with the Pied Pipers and Dorsey's band, and that's where he started. And then when he went out on his own, she was hooked. That's where I got my musical basis. You know, it was a bass line. And it was a very wide range of music that she listened to. And it was great stuff. I mean, it's just the best kind of music. Then I had to form my own opinions, because I remember when television started, and I was there when it started, when people had TV first in their homes. And we would watch Uncle Milty, and we would watch, different shows. And they had a show called Your Hit Parade, and then you saw those people singing. But the big impression that started the kids off was, Elvis, Bobby Darin, and of course the Everly Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
When I saw the Everly Brothers the first time on the Ed Sullivan Show, I said, wow, those guys are so good. And it's just two guitars and two guys singing, and it sounded so big. I got very impressed with that. And then the next thing we saw Elvis, and that was exciting. And then we saw Frankie Lane had a TV show, and 4 kids in white sweaters with red letters on them came sliding out onto the stage and sang a song called Why Do Fools Fall in Love.
Oh.
That was Frankie Lane and the Teenagers.
Yes.
And I remember that everybody that I knew in our neighborhood watched that show and was so taken with it that young kids our age were not only on television, but they had a hit record. And at that point, I decided I can do that. And we started singing on the streets. We weren't the only ones. I mean, everybody got into it. There was a whole bunch of kids snapping their fingers and learning to sing harmony and listening to transistor radios and trying to imitate the records that were popular. And really, that's how we learned.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a little edge, because being the young kid that was dragged to all my sister's lessons, I learned to sing harmony and melody, and I understood the concept of it at a very early age.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal. It kind of gave me a head start. But when I put my first group together, first I was a solo artist. I started imitating, Elvis and the Everly Brothers with the guitar, and I started writing songs. And then I got together with my friends in the neighborhood, and we really got going. And it was fun. It was just such fun. And then I moved away.
Did you form a group at that time, or?
I moved from Brooklyn to the suburbs. I was saved. I became a suburbanite.
Okay.
And I went to Far Rockaway High School, and I formed my first official group. And the official group was called the Harbor Lights. And we got a recording contract. That was my high school girlfriend, Sidell, was the lead singer, and a guy named Kenny Rosenberg and myself. And Kenny and I decided, after we got our record played on the radio, we didn't want to be with a girl in a group, because all of the cool records were being made by guy groups.
Yeah.
And to be honest, girls can be annoying sometimes if you have to go into a dressing room and they need their own space.
Right.
Hang a curtain up. I'm not getting changed with you guys. And it just became, we were kids. I didn't want to be bothered. I wanted to hang out with all the other guys.
Yeah.
So we got rid of the girl, who, by the way, was an excellent singer. And we formed this group with no name, but we were managed by a guy who managed a group called the Mystics. And the lead singer, or the second lead singer, because the first lead singer had left the group, they had a song called Hushabye.
Hushabye, yes. Is this the group that had the hit Hushabye?
Yeah. That was the Mystics.
Okay.
They were managed by the same manager as the Harbor Lights, a guy named Jim Gribble. He managed a whole bunch of people. Anyway, we said to Jay, you want to come in our group? We're going to form a new group, because we love your voice. You want to be our lead singer? And he was happy to, because he wasn't happy with his situation with the Mystics. And he joined us, and then I called my friend from Brooklyn that used to snap fingers with me, and Howie, and he joined the group. Eventually, that became Jane the Americans.
Yeah.
Simple as that, bang. And we just rehearsed, but we weren't named. We just were a group. and we fought our way to get an audition in Lieber and Stoller's office.
Oh, jeez.
And they loved us. We were the first white artist they ever handled, other than Elvis Presley, who, of course, they just wrote songs for Elvis. They didn't produce him or do anything else, but we got signed by the kings of the New York scene.
That's amazing. How in the world did you even get in there?
We knew a guy who knew a guy. Yeah. It was just that simple. Yeah. He says, I can get you an audition with Lieber and Stoller. He said, what bank do I have to stick up? Who do I have to shoot?
I mean, they were gigantic.
They were huge.
Oh, yeah.
The Drifters and the Coasters and, Benny King, Clyde McPhatter. They had the Exciters. They wrote Ruby Baby for Dion.
Oh, yeah.
They wrote songs for Peggy. I mean, they were the biggest. And they wrote and produced all these records.
You know what? It occurs to me, I got to tell you a quick story, because this has a little bit of a Lieber and Stoller spin on it. Mm-hmm. Back when Harper's was recording, we recorded a number of Randy Newman songs, and this was before Randy was known by anybody, really. But he was a great songwriter. And he not only wrote some really great tunes, but he arranged a number of tunes for us. And it got to a point where a lot of other groups started asking him if he would arrange songs for them, and he decided at some point that he was not going to do any more arranging at all. He had had it with all of these people, right? Even though our producer got him signed to Warner's, he just didn't have any hits at all. He was kept hitting a brick wall.
Goes that way. And
so after a number of people had asked him to arrange songs for them, he started turning them down, and all he did was finish arranging tunes for us, and that was it. He gets a call one day from Lieber and Stoller, and they say, we have a song we think you could do a really great job singing. We want you to sing the song. Mm-hmm. And would you come back to New York and we'll play it for you? And so he did, thinking that not only was he going to arrange his own song, he was going to be the singer on the song. He went back, they did the session, he sang the song, came back home to Hollywood. Couple months later, he hears the song on the radio, right. Only it's not him singing it. It's Peggy Lee. Is that all there is?
There you go. We were there for that, too.
Were you really? Well, it turns out that Lieber and Stoller didn't want him to sing at all. They just wanted him to do the arrangement, which was a killer arrangement.
They tricked him.
Yeah, they really did. Anyway, I didn't mean to get too far afield. Let's get back to it. Tell us some more Lieber and Stoller stories.
Well, we had our first big hit. We came out with the first record on United Artists. They assigned our contract to United Artists, but they were the producers. So we did Tonight from West Side Story.
Oh, yeah.
And United Artists was releasing the film West Side Story. So they said, well, we're doing, Ferrante and Teicher are doing a piano version. We want a teenage version of Tonight in conjunction with the release of the movie. So we did it. Of course, all the promotion went to Ferrante and Teicher. And in spite of that, we sold about 60,000 copies in the tri-state area.
Okay.
Kids loved it. Problem was it wasn't getting pushed. So, UA was a film company first and a record company second.
Yeah.
Then we came out we followed up with a song that Lieber and Stoller found that was written by Ted Darrell and Greg Richards. Wrote a song. It was a country and western demo of She Cries. And they decided to let us sing it, and they changed it. We never listened to the country's version of it till later. But they sang it to us as a Bayonne, kind of a sexy drone kind of a beat. And that's how we recorded it. And then they played the demo of the country song. We cracked up because it was so different. And then we had this huge hit.
Yeah.
But after that, we released, I thought, a song that should have been a monster, and it bombed. And then we released 2 more singles and nothing happened with. And the group was falling on hard times. So the group split up, and Marty, who was the guitar accompanist, and became an original member with the other 3 Americans. So we were at this point 5 guys. We were sitting in Liebenstoller's office waiting for some new material. And all the good material was going to the other groups because they were hot and we were cold. And we were getting the leftovers, and we didn't like the leftovers. So Jerry and Mike say, hey, you want to hear the Drifters' new single? We go, yeah. So they take us into their office, and they play us a demo, or actually a finished master of Only in America, with the Drifters singing it. And we sit there, and we all look at each other, we're dumbfounded. And it was great. First of all, it was great, a great song. And we say to them, well, why wouldn't you give us that song?
Yeah.
What would be more of a natural hookup than Only in America by Jay and the Americans?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, doesn't that sound like it makes sense?
Sure.
You know, we were very in awe of them, and we never talked back or got mad. You know what I'm saying? We just listened and watched. But we got annoyed at that one. And they said, hey, that, you know what? That's how it goes. You know, they're hot, and they're getting first choice. So we went home, and we were really miserable because we said, wow, that would have been a hit for us. And we had the new J to boot because the other J packed it in. And so J numbers, we're home, and the phone rings. My phone rings, and Jerry Lieber says, you know that song, Only in America? How would you guys like to record that song?
Oh, for God's sake.
And we go, are you kidding? We wanted to record the minute we heard it. Well, what had happened was they submitted the master to Atlantic Records, Atco. Atco turned around and said, hey, we're not going to have our act sing Only in America, could a guy from anywhere be president. There's no such thing as a black guy becoming president.
Gee.
And that's nonsense. You know, there wasn't even civil rights yet.
Yeah.
This was 1963, 64, you know? So Ahmad Ertegun threw the session back in their face. Now, they had paid for that session with their own money. So all of the strings and horns and the whole track and all of the session money was spent. So they called us, and they said, how would you like to? I said, sure. So we go into the studio, and they're playing us the Drifters track in the Drifters key, which was much too low for us. But we recorded the song, and then what happened was when we finished it, Jerry and Mike said, well, you know, it sounds a little dull. I think we could speed it up. And so they sped the song up. And then when it went to mastering at UA, the guy in the mastering places, it sounds a little slow. It sounds dull. And he sped it up.
So he put it into your key, ultimately.
Yeah, but we sounded like Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Oh, gee.
When we played, and if you listen to the record to this very day,
Yeah.
you can hear there's no way that we could have sung that song that fast in that key.
Yeah.
I mean, we crack up about it, but people loved it. They bought it. They loved it. They don't hear, you know, they don't listen with a technical ear. They just listen.
Yeah. You know, I wouldn't have even thought that.
Well, if you listen to the record now with new ears, you'll hear it. It's a whole key higher than we would have done it.
I got to tell you another story that coincidentally ties into this one. And I don't know if you guys ever did this in the studio, but I'll tell you what we used to do pretty regularly. It was called rapping, not R-A-P.
No, you used to put a wrap of tape around the capsule.
Yes, right, which would
that's how we
speed
sped
it
it
up. Okay, you did it then. All right. We did the same thing with Feeling Groovy, and it took it out of our range on stage. Didn't matter. I mean, no one knew the difference, but interesting. All right. And were you doing that on the East Coast probably at the same time we were doing it on the West Coast?
Before you, trust me.
That's right, yes. Yeah, that's right, because we were Feeling Groovy 67. When did you release that one? 63?
No, the song was written in 63. It was recorded by the Drifters, and we came out with that in like 63, I think.
Okay, all right. Well, we can go on for hours just with these side stories.
Yeah.
What we should do, actually, at some point.
I do believe it's toe tapping time. Let's see if we can squeeze a quick music break here. We're coming right back.
Stick all around the limbo clock. Hey, First you spread your limbo feet, then you move.
Let me jump here to another question. What do you consider to be among your most notable successes?
Well, when we started out, we were kids. The only reason that we wanted to have a record on the radio, that was what we wanted to do. We wanted our record to be played on the radio, which I had with my first group. It was very exciting. And my parents and my relatives and all of my friends and kids heard it on the radio. Mm-hmm. And it made me like, a big shot.
Sure.
I mean, I was too cool to touch. They're playing my record on the radio, And it was all about, signing autographs and getting the girls. That was the main thrust of it. There was no, message. We were putting a message out. We were going to change the world. We were kids. But we were kids with a good musical ear for a good song. That's really what we were about. And we were good ears for arranging and harmonies. And besides, we learned from Lieber and Stoller, and they were the best. We learned how to write a song, how to produce a record, how to put an orchestration together to enhance the song. I mean, they were our mentors, and every success we had, whether it was with them or after them, we owe them homage for having taught us the way. They didn't really teach us. We just sat there and watched.
Yeah, you just watched.
But you learn. But the biggest success is, having one hit, and I get annoyed when people say a one-hit wonder, because you know how hard it is to have a hit? A hit?
Yes.
You know how hard it is to have one hit.
Yeah.
Well, we had 10 top 10 hit records and 23 top 20 records and maybe 30 top 40 records and 13 albums and a career.
Yeah, spectacular.
Really a career, and that's an accomplishment.
Yeah, major.
Because now that we look back, we didn't know it then, but, after the third hit, we looked at each other and we said, you know what? This is getting serious. I mean, we can really take this further. This is the real deal. Mm-hmm. We never thought we were going to have... Whoever dreamt that when we released the record in 1961, that we would be singing it in 2017 to sold-out houses.
Jeez, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of amazing when you think
it is. It is.
And a whole bunch of other songs. I mean, we do 90 minutes of our stuff. So that's an accomplishment. And like I said to the audience the other day when we mentioned that, we played with the Beatles, but we're still playing and they're not.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. That is true.
It's true. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's true. And we love doing it. It's just, that's the accomplishment. Surviving, getting all of those hits, because, boy, it was hard. It was really hard making hit records. There was so much competition. And you needed the record companies to believe in you. Because if they didn't, even if you had a record contract, if they didn't put money into the promotion...
That was it.
I mean, if UA had put the money into the promotion of us that Capitol put into the Beach Boys...
Yeah.
We would be in another stratosphere.
Sure, of course.
I mean, we did it in spite of them instead of because of them. I mean, that's how it goes.
You mentioned the Beatles. Did you open for them at some show?
Well, we didn't close, that's for sure. Yeah, we opened for them at the Washington Coliseum.
Oh, yeah.
And in February 60, I want to say 64, maybe 65. I'm not, I'm fuzzy with years. There were so many of them. But we did their first show in the States on their first go-round. They went from that show on by train to do Ed Sullivan the next day.
I just wonder if you have ever been able to track down, I know there's footage of them at the Washington show.
Right.
Do you suppose the whole show exists somewhere on...
I doubt it.
Yeah. Because there was really not videotape in those days. I guess that was film, apparently.
Yeah. We got a great response from them, but boy, I want to tell you something. The promotion that went into those kids, they were bewildered by it. The response to just announcing, ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles, the scream, and they hadn't even done anything yet.
Yeah, I know it.
They had just come to the country, But what happened was they showed all these newsreels of the kids fainting in Europe when they landed. They came from Germany to London, and girls were fainting, and half of those girls were paid, and half of the girls were real. But it didn't matter. It was shown on network television as news, and, you know, kids like to mimic other kids. And I'm not, believe me, those guys were brilliant songwriters.
Yeah,
And they were terrific
Sure, yeah.
musicians, and they were with the right people. I mean, their producer was just brilliant. But the whole way that it was presented and the timing of them, with this country being in mourning, with our president having been assassinated.
Yes.
I mean, the country could not have been at a lower point, and these kids were a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, they sure
were. They were the first thing to put a smile on everybody's face.
Yep, absolutely. And I remember seeing them when they played the Cow Palace in San Francisco.
Yeah.
They could have turned all the lights off in the Cow Palace. The entire place was illuminated by flash bulbs that never stopped. It went for the whole show. They never stopped. And the screaming never stopped. Yeah.
They never heard a thing that they did.
Yeah, I know.
I'm amazed that they were as good as they were. They couldn't hear a thing, and there were no monitors.
Yeah, no monitor speakers. Sure, that's right.
I mean, they were worthless, whatever they were.
We're talking about memorable people, and you mentioned the Beatles. Tell me some other people that you worked with that are memorable.
Well, we worked with the Stones in New York.
Okay.
On their first go-round when Brian Jones was in the group. You know who Sid Bernstein is?
Yes, right.
All right, well, I think Sid promoted the show. It was us and the Stones.
Okay.
What happened was he comes into our dressing room. It was a big common dressing room. You know, like a big green room, but everybody was hanging out in it.
Sure.
And Sid says, listen, you got to do me a favor, guys. We said, what's that? He said, well, you're going to have to close the show because the Stones have a TV appearance. And it's only at, 5 o'clock, and that would be after they'd be on stage. So they're going to have to open, and you're going to have to close.
Okay, all right.
And I said, thanks, Sid. That's going to work out great. And the lines were around the block, and kids were screaming just from shadows walking past the Venetian blinds in the windows. Policemen on mounted police and barriers, and they sure were not screaming for us that way. So the Stones go on, and they're screaming and yelling and carrying on. And then they finish their set, and they throw their guitars to the roadies and run out of the place into a limo with the entire audience chasing them down 7th Avenue. Now the whole place is emptied out, and we go on. And we're playing for the cleanup crew. And boy, they loved us. We got a standing ovation from the cleanup crew.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? Classic story.
That's showbiz.
Let's just take a moment for a brief musical interlude. We'll be coming back shortly, so stick around.
Sighs, the lonesome organ grinder cries, the silver saxophones say I should refuse you. The cracked bells and washed out horns blow into my face with scorn, but it's not that way. I wasn't born to lose you. I want you, I want you, I want you so bad.
Speaking of which, we're talking about all of the various successes that you've had. Most of us know that life's not all a bed of roses. If you have one, give us your best failure story, either personally or with the band.
Well, I can give you a couple. One, of course, is when I was voted, when the group was, I had to make a speech when we were honored in the Vogue Group Hall of Fame.
Okay.
We were inducted, so I thanked my ex-wife for divorcing me.
Oh. Okay.
Now, I don't know how would you look at that, as a failure or not a failure.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second one, it was personal. After the group, I became an A&R director and a record producer because I produced a lot of the records for our group. And so afterwards, I was sent by two pretty well-known management company, Lieber and Krebs.
Krebs.
they produced a lot of hit acts. But let me tell you the story.
Yeah.
So they get a hold of me and say, listen, we want you to go to Boston to check out an act for us. See if we should, sign them up to a management deal and then, maybe you want to produce them. So we'll get them a record deal. So I go to Boston to a club, and a group comes on, and I listen, and they're pretty good, but I looked at it, and I said, you know what? I went back to the guys who sent me, Steve Lieber and Dave. I said, they're a pretty good rock band, but it's like the guy's a poor man imitation of Mick Jagger.
Huh.
He's doing Mick Jagger. So I passed, and Lieber and Stoller signed them anyway. Their name was Aerosmith.
Oh, jeez.
So that's a failure. I would say that was a boo-boo.
Amazing.
I didn't see that one coming, but they weren't singing Toys in the Attic on stage either, so,
Right. That's amazing. Now, that would have been, what are we talking? That's maybe not 20 years ago.
Oh, more.
More than that?
It was, 60, it was in the late 60s, maybe 70, something like that.
Okay. All right. Got it.
Listen, everybody that's in the music business, if you say no, 90% of the time or more, you're right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's just hard to find that listen, we were right about a couple of guys that we started in the business. Two guys walked into our production office when I was doing the production of the group. They sang some songs for us, and we got all excited, and we hired them because they had no money and they just graduated college. So we hired them to be our bass player and keyboard player. They played with us in that capacity for almost 3.5, 4 years. And then they went out, these stupid guys actually quit our group, went out on their own, and formed their own band called Steely Dan.
Oh, boy.
So we were right about that one. We tried to get them off the ground, and everybody passed.
Yeah, amazing.
So you never know.
No, you never know. That is so true.
Well, we knew Donald and Walter were brilliant. We knew that.
Yeah.
Immediately. Yeah.
I know that when we were working with, most of our sessions were done by the Wrecking Crew, and a lot of the people associated with them or around them ultimately went on
to be big,
to do their own thing. So
sure. Well, we were trying to promote them. We cut records, we cut demos with them with their songs, and the biggest Aristopathy. I mean, everybody. We got in to see everybody because we were red hot. So everybody wanted to talk to us.
Sure.
And we would play these demos of these songs with these guys singing and playing. And it was very Steely Dan, but it was just too soon, Yeah. And then 3 years later, we gave them, we couldn't do any more with them, and we released them, gave them to one of our best friends, a guy named Gary Katz. He went out to California with them and produced 7 of the greatest albums in rock and roll history.
Yeah.
With them.
I need to ask you, because I can't remember if we talked about this or not, did you ever reach a point, let's call it somewhere in the 60s, maybe even in the 70s, when things slowed down so much that you thought about not continuing in music?
You know what? Anybody in the arts that doesn't think that this is their last gig,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care if you're a movie star or a ballet dancer or a Broadway theater guy. Everybody's insecure about that. And if you're not like the Beatles where you have hit after hit after hit, or the Eagles that have hit after hit after hit, there are always lulls. I mean, we had big lulls, and we had lead singer changes. After She Cried, we got insecure because we didn't come up with another hit. He left. We figured, oh, boy. We found in Second J. We went back to Lieber and Stoller. They said, we don't know what to do with this guy. He's totally different from the other guy. They don't write songs. They don't write songs like Caramia. They don't write songs for a big, powerful voice like Jay Black. And Jay was not a bluesy kind of guy. It wasn't like he was Elvis. So they didn't know what to do with him. We were lucky that we found Only in America. That was his first hit.
And this is Jay number 2.
That's Jay number 2. And
Yeah.
we ran off 10 hits, but they weren't one after another. We had big lulls. I mean, we had a huge run of Only in America, Come a Little Bit Closer, Let's Lock the Door and Throw Away the Key. We had like 5 in a row. Caramia, Some Enchanted, I mean, they just kept coming. And then it stopped. And that's when, but by that point we had enough of a catalog where we were at least working, and our manager was smart enough to say, you guys are clean enough to go into where all of the big folk groups have played in the colleges, because they resisted rock and roll until we went out there and broke that door down. It was like the Kingston Trio of rock, whether they and the Americans, So we did 8 years of college concerts, which kept us going without hits. But we had already had 6 hits. That was the blessing. But then we started doing our own production, finally got to that point.
Okay.
And I produced 2 albums called Sands of Time and Wax Museum with the group. I mean, we all put our heads together and we would pick songs, but we picked songs. Nobody was writing great songs for us. All the good songs were going to the hot acts again. So we came up with an idea. Listen, if they're not going to write great songs for us, why don't we do great songs that were already hits that we wished we had recorded and rearranged them like us and put it together? Now, nobody knew what a rock revival album was then. There was never, that word was never used. And we did, the first one was Sands of Time, and on that record were a whole bunch of hits that we wished we had done, and one of them was This Magic Moment.
Yeah. Monster record, yeah.
And we came blasting back onto the charts.
Gee.
And then the next album was called Wax Museum, and that one had Walking in the Rain on it. So we started the rock revival, but of course nobody would ever give us credit for it. We're like the Rodney Dangerfield of rock and roll.
Right, yeah. I think you're probably a couple years older than me, but for listeners
How dare you?
Yeah, I know. I was born in 45. You were born in
41.
Okay, there we go. We both can remember back in the day when we were as fit as a fiddle. Now, as aging baby boomers, we probably no longer look much like Jack LaLanne, but if you're up for talking about it, how's your health nowadays?
I play beach volleyball when I get the time, when I'm not working.
Yeah.
That's a 2-man game. It's pretty aggressive.
Sure, I used to play it in Santa Cruz.
Yeah, so you know what beach volleyball 2-man is.
2-man, yeah, sure, absolutely, yeah.
And like I say, my wife and I just finished doing the boardwalk actually, it's 4.4 miles, so we did it 8.4 miles.
Wow.
On the bike, in the wind, a little windy. And, other than the diabetes too, I'm pretty much the same as I always was.
Are you doing anything in particular for that? Because I have it as well. It hasn't been a problem for me, but it, I believe, is just beginning to be after probably 20 years.
Yeah, I got it handled pretty well. I mean, listen, when I don't eat right, my blood sugar goes too high. I do take insulin once a day. It's a 24-hour shot. I just started doing that, I think, last year. So, and I've had it for 10 years. So, it's a progressive disease.
Yeah.
It's not going to get better.
Right, yeah.
And I'm not the kind that I could be so disciplined.
Oh, God.
That I can, you can beat the disease if you're incredibly disciplined and do everything right and starve yourself and be a vegetarian. I'm not going to do, you know what? I'm 76. I'm really happy. I'm not going to make the rest of my life a misery. One of the things that I enjoy is eating these, fun food. I don't abuse it. I don't sit there and eat sugar all day long, but I'm going to have a hero sandwich or I'm going to have some fun.
Of course.
I can't do it. There are some people that can. I can't.
Well, and I think you put your finger on it, when you said it is probably possible, given that you did everything exactly right, that you could either keep it at bay or maybe send it the other way.
Other way,
who's going to do that? I'm not doing that either. So
my wife could do that.
Really?
She's the most disciplined person I've ever met in my life. And you know what? She's just amazing. I can't do that. She says, but I want you. I said, look, I got 24 more years you got to deal with me. I'm going to eat what I want to eat. Leave me alone.
You know, I've said somewhere along the line, because I've quit smoking more than a few times. I'm now off it about 1.5 years, which is good, and I'll hope to stay off. But I've somewhere along the line, I said, when I get old enough, maybe late 80s, I'm going to start again, only because I love it so much, and I probably won't have that much time left anyway. So who knows?
Yeah, well, I don't smoke. I used to love. I was the mall. They called me the Marlboro man.
Really?
Yeah, I smoked incessantly. Yeah. When we were in the studio and
Sure.
we were making records, and but I quit over 35 years ago, and I don't find I need it anymore.
That's great. That's great that you weren't tempted back. I was tempted back several times, and
well, I went back one time, but I said, you know what, I really don't like it. You know, once you're off it that long. Yeah. Now when I smell a cigarette, I go, whoa.
Yeah, well, and probably when you go in some of the clubs, for example, you go in clubs, casinos. Yeah, it just reeks in there. Yep. Have your musical taste changed since the 60s, and what kind of music do you listen to now?
There's only two kinds of music, good and bad.
Right.
Okay? That's how I break it down. There has always been good and bad. Through every generation, there has been good and bad. Mm-hmm. Only now, because of the addition of social media and the outlets where anybody with a computer can sing and play and upload onto YouTube, there's more bad music than ever.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot more good music than ever. There's just more music out there. I'm still pretty much the same taste. I always had a wide range of taste. There's a couple of groups out now that floor me that I think are fabulous. I love the Chainsmokers. This new group, I love this Panic at the Disco. Is a really cool singer. Of course, I still go to Steely Dan. I listen to whatever they do, new or old. Ed Sheeran is brilliant.
You know, I've seen him a couple times, but I've never listened to his stuff.
He is brilliant.
Really? Okay.
This guy is a storyteller and a brilliant musician.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, you know what? I just look at certain people, and even if it's not my particular taste, they're so talented musically that they catch your eye. I mean, listen, I watched that country award, that country tribute to the Bee Gees, and I saw, I mean, I always liked him, the one that's Matt, he's one of the judges on one of the shows. Keith Urban. Keith Urban is one of the best guitar player singers I've ever seen. And I saw, I mean, you know, we worked with everybody. We also, there was a guy named Jimmy James when we toured with Little Richard.
Okay.
Who changed his name to Jimi Hendrix. So I saw him play guitar. And I'm telling you, some of these guys are that good now. They're just so good. So there's a lot of good stuff out there, a lot of good people out there. And there's no reason for people to say, oh, this, you know, the new music stinks. You listen to Ed Sheeran talk, he tells you he's like telling his life. He's like a troubadour. He's fantastic.
Well, that's great, because lyrics seem to have disappeared for quite a while.
Not with this guy. And not with Taylor Swift. I mean, there are people out there that tell some great stories. So, you know, that's, I mean, I listen to a lot of different things. Like I said, there's two kinds of music.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. I've never heard it put that way, but it makes total sense.
You know, I grew up in New York, and I was lucky because in New York City, back in the day when I was a kid, because I'm a little older than you, there was only AM radio. But if you flipped the dial, you would get a blues station, a jazz station, a Latin station, a country station, a rock station. I mean, you know, symphonies, they were all on the dial. And we could turn the dial and listen to 10 different styles of music. And we did. And that's why Jay and the Americans, when we made records with Leiber and Stoller, we had that three Latin percussion guys playing on Come a Little Bit Closer. And we have that feel to our band because of the exposure.
I'm trying to think here. We were in San Francisco. KYA was the big rocker at the time. And I'm trying to think of what else there was. We did not have that spread that you just mentioned. It wasn't available here.
Very few places had that spread. That's what I'm talking. So the guys that came from the East Coast, even Philly and even Boston, they had, we had some stations that traveled far. Chicago had some stations that traveled far. We used to get KLS, I think it was. There was 60,000 watts. I mean, those stations traveled halfway across the country. But we had 20 stations. So we were very fortunate if you were the kind of kid that just didn't stick to one thing, that liked to experiment. We got exposed.
That may have been one reason why that whole clump of geography back there was so loaded with talent and music.
Absolutely.
Because of the exposure.
Absolutely.
Because we didn't have that.
They were playing Black State. It was called sepia music.
Okay.
Before.
Yeah.
Then it was called soul.
Okay.
Then it was called R&B.
Yes, right.
But we were exposed to that. And we were exposed to salsa and Latin. There was a Fania All-Stars there. I mean, we had Willie Rodriguez and Willie Bopo played on our dates. We had some pretty famous Latin guys that are in the Latin Hall of Fame. We didn't know that then. We found out later who they became, But they were playing on our sessions. And Lieber and Stoller knew who they were. We didn't. But we were exposed to this music. It was very natural for us to stick that stuff in. I think that's why all of our records were so different. We just didn't do one kind of record. We had ballads, we had fast records, we had Latin-style records, we had bubblegum record, we did everything. We didn't lock ourselves into one thing. And I think it's because all of us, from me, from Howie, Kenny, all the Jays, we all grew up here and heard all this stuff. So it wasn't foreign.
That's an important point to make because there's a lot of people, and there's millions of people across the country who are clueless when it comes to that hotbed, that pocket of what was going on in that geographic area at that time. And I didn't get into it at all. I was listening to rock and roll and a little bit of easy listening, maybe. Mm-hmm. That was about it. Let me shift for a second. What's been your most challenging experience, regardless of whether you achieved it?
The first challenge was when you're a kid and you're listening to the radio, you want to hear your record played on the radio.
Of course, yes.
And we all did. We all wanted to hear our record played on the radio. And why? So that we could show off for our parents and our family.
Right, exactly.
And so that we could get the girls to swoon.
Yes.
That's what it was about. We were innocent kids. There were 100 groups on the street corner. Why us? Because we had pardon the expression, we had the balls to storm into Lieber and Stoller.
Yeah, the intent.
Nothing was going to stop us. We were going to do it.
I understand that because that was the way it was for us, too. There was no wall that we couldn't knock down. It really wasn't a matter of being rejected by anybody. All of us have been rejected 4 zillion times.
We had the nerve to go for the top guys. Most people were scared to death to go to that office. We couldn't wait to sing for those guys.
What do you see as some of the biggest differences between the 60s and now? Anything jump out?
Just the fact that, like I said, that anybody with a mic and a computer can put up a piece of music and get exposure, regardless of their talent level. The fact that there's very little groundswell. I mean, in the 60s, you went out, you played clubs, you got a following. You cut a demo, and you prayed that when you sent the demo in, somebody listened, and you get a record deal. Today, the only platform other than YouTube exposure is TV, because there's very little place for exposure on the radio. There's very little radio left. It's all .com radio. Not much radio left. So unless you're on American Idol or The Voice, that's the main the instant way to get it done. So that's changed a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
TV is the exposure medium now, which you only got on TV before if you were already a major star.
And interestingly, people have asked me, as I'm sure they've asked you many times, my son-in-law's daughter wants to get into music. Where does he start, or where does she start, right?
Go on YouTube, because that's where you're going to get exposure.
Yeah.
If you get 1 million hits, somebody will pay attention and sign you.
And it used to be...
And it's because these kids now, they don't even take a pencil and pad to school anymore. They all have laptops, and it's all social media. They're all with their thumbs texting. Nobody talks.
Everybody's looking down all the time.
And their thumbs are going, and that's how people now recognize talent, with their thumbs. If you're not on the iPhone or the iPad, or on TV, you're not going to be seen.
You're not there. And it used to be, when you and I were coming up, there was something of a vague roadmap. You knew you started here, you auditioned for this guy, you moved here, you followed some general pattern on an upward course.
Now they have their course. They go on to the people that know how to handle social media. I see these kids, even some of the kids that go on Idol, they already have 1 million followers before they go on the show.
Yeah, that's astounding.
To compete against other kids. They have 1 million followers. Listen, we've got some major stars that started that way. Justin Bieber was the perfect example of the new roadmap to stardom.
It's an interesting comparison, actually, the new roadmap, because it does exist, just not the way we used to do it. So,
well, listen, we're 3 generations. We're in our 70s. We're 4 generations down the line. They found new ways to attract the interest.
Let me tail it off by saying, what are you doing nowadays, and what are your plans for the future?
Well, like I said, I'm 76. I got 24 more years of touring.
Right.
And then I'm retiring.
Yeah, okay.
We all have a vigorous... We tour a lot. We work a lot. We do 40 to 60 jobs a year.
Really? Oh, you're working a lot. That's like when you used to work.
That's more than we ever worked.
Yeah.
And you know what? We're loving it more now than we ever did.
Oh, that's great. That is terrific.
Because now we're doing it because we love to do it. Nobody's telling us what to do. We're in charge. There's no record company telling you got to do this, you got to sing that. There's no our manager. My manager, he does pretty much what we want to do.
Is that Mitchell?
Mitchell's our agent. That's TCI. He's our agent.
I have to send him a note and thank him. He's turned me on to you. Who else did I do this week? Bill Cunningham of the Box Tops. Who else did I do? Tom Garrett of the Classics 4. I've done 3 of these things just this week through him because he turned me on to him. So,
well, be nice to Tom Garrett because I hate him. I always tell him I hate him. It's a running joke. Yeah. Every time I say, how about the Classics 4? By the way, I hate Tom Garrett. No. It's a joke.
Hang on. Now, let me see if I can find it. Let me get my Tom Garrett file. I want to see. I wrote something down, and let me read to you what I wrote. Tell Sandy Dean that Tom Garrett doesn't like him. And it's something about a one-word title story. I didn't quite get that, but yeah. So both you guys are on the same wavelength. So yeah.
Well, I have a running joke. We did a cruise and he was the MC. Or something.
Okay.
And I said, boy, Jay was saying, how about the Classics and Tom Garrett? And I said, I hate that guy. And the audience cracked up. So it became a running joke.
Right, yeah.
And we said, everything about him is one word and one title.
Right, one title, that's
Snoopy,
right.
What are all of their hits? I forget the name of their hits. They have Stormy.
Right, Tracy's, yeah, right.
I said Snoozy, Doc, Dopey. I said, we were ragging on him. And it went on for the whole cruise, 8 days. But, he's a really nice man.
Well, I don't know about you, but I've had a most enjoyable time doing this interview with you, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk again in the future. So until we do talk again, you take it easy, Sandy.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Until next week, keep your face in a smile. It makes everything worthwhile. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to America's Oldies But Goodies with Dick Scapatoni. Join us again next week for more memories from the good old days. In the words of Jerry Garcia, what a long, strange trip it was. The Swingin' 60s. I'm John Berg. See you then.